So today I'm going to show you guys the best sleeper cars in GTA 5. So this video is going to showcase my 15 picks for the best sleeper cars in GTA 5 in 2022. Whether it's because of their looks, general underratedness, or extremely low price, all of these cars are true sleepers that will definitely surprise you either in a drag or a track race. Now before we get started, massive shout out goes to Bruffy1322 for testing these cars and publishing their top speeds and lap times for the community to reference. His channel, his car testing spreadsheet, as well as his website gtacars.net will all be linked in the description if you want to check those out. With all that said, let's get into the cars. Alright boys, first off we have the Annis Elegy RH8. We had to kick off this list with the absolute GOAT. This car offers the best of all worlds. It's got decent customization, it looks really good, and it still offers amazing performance in 2022. Plus, the best thing about this car is that it's free, which makes it one of the most accessible cars for pretty much any player, new or old. Now, even though the Elegy RH8 isn't necessarily the best example of a sleeper per se, because it's based on an R35 GTR, the RH8 still performs surprisingly well after 9 years of being in the sports class. Although the sports class has seen a lot of meta changes and is extremely unbalanced to this day, the RH8 still manages to outperform a majority of cars in this class. Its top speed is decent, but its acceleration and consistent handling give it a pretty competitive edge for track racing, which gives it the edge over a lot of modern cars, especially those that were added with the tuners update. Next up, we have the Benefactor Shafter V12, which is a really OG sleeper of GTA 5 that still holds its own here in 2022. This car is truly a jack of all trades. It has okay customization, but it looks great, it sounds amazing, and it has all the performance to back it up. It accelerates incredibly quickly and handles decent considering that it's a heavier car and is also rear-wheel drive. Plus, if you're into drifting, this is actually one of the better drift cars in the game when you equip those low-grip tires. Now, being extremely cheap, but actually one of the fastest four-door cars in the game, it's a no-brainer that the Shafter V12 is considered a good sleeper. Its top speed is on the higher end of the sports class, being faster in a straight line than a lot of the more well-known cars that are typically used in races. Now, although it's not the fastest in terms of track performance in the sports class, the Shafter V12 can actually be used in sedan class races and still smokes a lot of the more expensive cars in that class like the Cinque Mila and the Deity. And next up we have the BF Bifta, and I'm sure you probably weren't expecting to see this car on this list. Now, even though the Bifta is extremely old and it actually dropped with the very first GTA Online DLC back in November of 2013, this is still a surprisingly fun car almost 9 years later. Now obviously because of the Bifta's age it doesn't offer a ton of customization, but it is still a blast to rip around both on and off road. The handling isn't too bad, but it does suffer a little bit because it's got a rear bias center of mass and a short wheelbase, so it can be a little bit snappy in the turns. However, the Bifta is definitely deserving of that sleeper status because its performance is actually pretty comparable to, if not better than, some of the more commonly used off-road class cars like the Trophy Truck and the Desert Raid, even though the Bifta is based off of an old Myers-Manx kit car, which is awesome. Next up we have the BF Club, which is a very underrated car overall. Now despite this car not being from Benny's, it still has a lot of awesome and authentic customization options. It also feels great performance wise. It's obviously not the fastest car in a straight line, but still handles really confidently due to its size and low center of mass. Now, even though it is pricey, I still think the Club deserves that sleeper status for outperforming most of the other modern cars in the compacts class, and also a bunch of other tuner-esque cars that exist in the sports class. It's kind of crazy to think that an old Volkswagen Polo can actually outpace a lot more modern cars, both in a straight line as well as around a track. And next up we have the most recent addition to this list, the BF Weevil Custom. This car offers amazing customization in Benny's, and there's lots of options to make this car look insanely cool. In addition, performance wise it feels great, it has awesome acceleration, and considering what it is, it handles pretty decent. It can be a bit understeery and snappy, but can still quarter pretty competently once you get the hang of it. Even though it is pretty expensive, I still give the BF Weevil Custom that sleeper status for unexpectedly beating out most cars in the game for top speed. It's now actually faster than the Pariah in a straight line, if you can imagine that, and is also on the pace of the Bravado Buffalo STX and a lot of more modern muscle cars around a track. Plus, in addition to that, you can also destroy people in drag races using the burnout boost in this car. If you want to do this, all you have to do is floor the car from a stop, let the car pick up a little bit of speed in first gear, and then slam on the brakes. Basically, then you'll start doing a massive rolling burnout, which will cause you to pick up a ton of speed, and will easily blow the doors off of any normal car you'd race in a drag race. Overall, this car is an absolute blast, and if you're willing to spend the money on it, you're going to have one of the coolest and best sleepers in the game. Next up, we have the Declasse Yosemite. This is probably one of the more well-known sleepers in this game, but obviously for a lot of good reasons. First of all, the Yosemite is a super unique car with great customization and also really good performance for a fairly low cost. You can style it pretty much any way you want, and you could actually make really good use of it in track races, drag races, and in car meets. In addition, this car is an awesome sleeper because it offers really good performance in comparison with the rest of the muscles class. Plus, you can also style it like an old beat-up truck if you wanted to. The combo of amazing straight line performance and awesome wheeling abilities, along with surprisingly solid handling considering that it's an older and heavier rear-wheel drive truck, makes the Yosemite an awesome sleeper that blows the doors off of most other model muscle cars in the class. Next up, we have the Karin Calico GTF. This is a pretty well-known car, but at its core, I still think it's a great example of a sleeper car. Now, since its release, the Calico GTF was pretty well received for its insane straight-line acceleration since it's all-wheel drive, plus it offers pretty good handling in a track scenario, albeit being a bit understeery. This is all not to mention the fact that this car dropped with the LS Tuners DLC, so it has a lot of customization. As it turns out, this is actually the most modifiable car in the game. At the end of the day, though, the Calico GTF is still based upon a 90s Toyota Celica GT4, and although that car was pretty quick for its time, the Calico GTF here in GTA 5 manages to outpace a lot of more modern cars in the sports class. Both in terms of acceleration and handling, the Calico GTF is actually surprisingly fast compared to cars like the Benefactor Schlagen GT, Dinka Jester, and Obey 8F Drafter, all of which are more modern cars that you'd think would be much faster than it. Additionally, the Calico GTF still manages to outpace almost every other car in the tuner subclass, including the more modern Emperor Vector and Dinka Jester RR. The fact that an older Celica is still able to pull that off definitely means that it deserves that sleeper title. Next up, we have the Karin Previon. This, in my opinion, was a pretty underrated car from the LS Tuners DLC, but in my opinion is also one of the more unique vehicles in GTA 5. Obviously, coming from the Tuners DLC, it has a ton of customization. Although the quality of the car is a little bit rough around the edges, you can still personalize it pretty much however you want, and although this car does come at a high price, you will still get a really cool car that offers surprisingly good performance when you're done with it. Handling-wise, it feels really good for a heavier rear-wheel drive car, plus it also has great power and decent acceleration, and it also drifts pretty well if that's your thing. Now, I definitely think that the Previon's a good example of a sleeper because it's actually surprisingly quick for a car that's based off of an older Lexus SC400 or Toyota Soarer. Given this car's older inspiration, it's kind of crazy that this car is actually the fastest in the coupes class nowadays, outperforming higher-end coupes cars like the Zion, Felon, and Exemplar, and it's even faster than the Sentinel XS with the HSW upgrades, which is absolutely awesome. And next up, we have the Lampadati Pagale. This has to be one of my absolute favorite cars here in GTA 5. This car is super refined, it sounds awesome, it has okay customization, but it looks beautiful. Performance-wise, the Pagale feels great. It can feel a little wonky and weird in the turns because it's front-wheel drive and a very long car, but it definitely makes up for that with its straight-line performance. And I definitely think the car deserves the sleeper status because it's a super underrated car in the first place, plus it actually gives a lot of the more popular sports classics cars a really good run for their money. In my opinion, it's pretty awesome to see a front-wheel drive car like this that's actually modeled after a Citroen SM be faster around a track and in a straight line than more well-known sports classics cars like the Mamba, which is based upon a Shelby Cobra, and the Coquette Classic, which is based on an older Corvette. It's also actually faster than a lot of cars in the sports class as well. Next up, we have the Rune Cheburek. You guys know I had to feature this car somewhere on this list. Even though this car is pretty heavily memed on, obviously, it still feels great in 2022. It has great customization, it looks pretty slick in my opinion. Plus, if you prefer this, you can also throw on the cardboard body kit. Now, performance-wise, the Cheburek feels pretty good. It's rear-wheel drive and handles okay, but it can be a bit snappy in the turns, but it accelerates really well in a straight line. I definitely think this car is well deserving of the sleeper title because it's actually surprisingly quick in relation to other cars in the sports classics class. Even though this car is mainly inspired by an older Lada 2100 series, it can still outperform sports classics cars like the JB700, which is an older Aston Martin, and a bunch of other more iconic cars, both in a straight line and around a track. Next up, we have the Ubermacht Reinhardt, and I'm so glad that Rockstar finally decided to show the wagon some love by giving us this awesome recreation of a BMW 3 Series Touring. Obviously, the Reinhardt is a very recent addition to the game, but it was definitely needed in my opinion, and this car doesn't disappoint. Even though it is pretty expensive, it still has some amazing customization, and in my opinion, looks beautiful. On top of that, I think it's very well deserving of the sleeper status. Even though it's a heavier wagon, it still blows more expensive cars like the Cinque Mila and the Deity right out of the water in the sedans class, which is crazy considering that those cars are based upon higher end Maseratis and Bentleys and probably have a bit more power. In addition to that, the Reinhardt is the best in class around a track for the sedans class, plus its acceleration and top speed are actually higher than a lot of sports class cars too. I definitely was not expecting that from this car, and it's definitely one of the better examples of a true sleeper that we have here in GTA 5. Next up, we have the Vapid Blade, which is easily one of the most underrated cars in the game. This is a really well-balanced muscle car as it's super cheap, has great straight line performance, and is an awesome drag car with a very strong wheelie, and it also handles surprisingly good, although it is a bit more prone to understeer. It also actually just pretty solid too, if that's your thing. Now, I definitely think the Blade gets that sleeper status considering that this car is based on an older Ford Falcon, but surprisingly, it still performs extremely well. It's awesome that the Blade actually outperforms a lot of the more well-known classic muscle cars in the game for a fraction of the cost. Generally speaking, the Blade drives a lot better and smoother than a lot of other cars in the muscles class, and genuinely drives a lot like more modern muscle cars, which is great. This is overall a very fun car to drive and definitely worth giving a shot if you don't own one already. And next up, we have the Vapid Clique, which is an extremely clean and very unique resto mod inspired car, and in 2022 I don't think this car has gotten the attention that it truly deserves. This car, although it is a little bit more expensive for a muscle car, still offers quite a bit of customization and awesome performance. It's got the straight line speed and acceleration, as well as handling to get around a track pretty quickly, even though it doesn't like hitting bumps in the road. Now, I think the Clique is a great example of a sleeper car because considering that it's inspired after a 1950s Ford Coupe, it actually still outperforms a lot of modern cars in the muscles class. Its overall really balanced handling and relatively low weight gives it a really good advantage on the track, and in a straight line it's not that bad either. If you want a high performing and very unique muscle car with really good customization, I think the Clique is the best way to go. Next up, we have the Vapid Hustler. This is yet another muscle car, I know, but I didn't want to overlook this one. The Hustler is a very commonly overlooked muscle car, and I'm not sure why, to be honest. Even though it is based upon a very old 30s Ford Coupe, it is still super unique and offers a surprising amount of customization and great performance. I think this car is well deserving of the sleeper title because when the Hustler is fully upgraded, it's actually at the upper end of the muscles class, offering decent handling for a car of this age and style, as well as amazing straight line acceleration and top speed. While it's not the absolute best in this class, the Hustler is still super satisfying to blow the doors off of a lot of more modern muscle and sports cars with. Plus, you can obviously leave the exterior stock and put on some older style wheels to add to that sleeper aesthetic. And last but not least, we have the Vapid Retinue Mark II, and this car has really kind of flown under the radar, especially with the more HSW cars in the Sports Classics class, which means that you really don't see it being driven around a lot in car meets or races. However, give the Retinue a shot and you'll be blown away by this car's performance. Despite being based upon an older Ford Escort, the Retinue Mark II still offers an insane amount of grip around a track with decent acceleration and top speed. Generally speaking, I love the way this car drives. It will take a bit of getting used to, but is still super fun and rewarding to whip around a track. Plus, it's got a great amount of customization to turn it into pretty much whatever you'd like. However, I still think the Retinue Mark II is an awesome example of a sleeper since again, this car is based off of an older Ford Escort, but still manages to out-accelerate and outpace a lot of higher-end sports class cars like the Torero, Swinger, Infernus Classic, and others. While you can go all out and make this thing look like an insane rally or race car, it is still pretty cool to leave the Retinue Mark II stock and still be able to decimate in most sports classics races. And that is a wrap for my list of the absolute best sleeper cars in GTA 5. Hopefully you guys found this video helpful in showcasing some truly underrated and unexpectedly fast cars that are definitely worth trying out next chance you get. Thank you guys so much for watching and supporting my channel, and have an amazing day.